Good morning and welcome to the American Public Works Association's Talking Top Tech webinar series. Today's panel discussion will be 1 hour in duration and is titled Talking Top Tech, Unmanned Aircraft Systems, UAS, or Drones. Due to the free-form format of this program, it is not eligible for CEUs. My name is Rita Cassida, and I will be your facilitator today. I am an education manager at APWA. I have a BS in Mechanical Engineering from Kansas State University and an MS in Engineering Management from the University of Kansas. I am a licensed professional engineer in Kansas, and before joining APWA, I served as the Public Works Director for the city of Lewisburg, Kansas. A recording of today's program will be available in the APWA Members Library and on YouTube within 1 week. APWA members can log into the library to access content free of charge. Not an APWA member? Take the Members Library for a test drive. Spend 2 weeks accessing all the materials in our Members Library for free. Look for the link to sign up in your email today after the program. Today's session is interactive, so if you have questions for our speakers, please type them into the chat pod. You may do this at any time throughout the program. For today's program, we need to set up the chat pod. To do this, click the arrow in the Send To field to display a menu. Scroll to the top of the menu and select Host, Presenter, and Panelists. When you are in full screen mode, you can access the chat pod by hovering the mouse at the top of the screen and clicking on the chat icon. After today's program, please join us on LinkedIn to continue the conversation. A link was included in your program instructions and is on the screen now. Now it's time to introduce today's panelists. Chris Balaji is the Director of San Joaquin County Public Works. Trevor Bird is the Party Chief UAV Pilot for Anderson Engineering. Patrick Ryan Gray is the GIS Coordinator for McAllen Public Utility. Tom McMahon is the Senior VP of Advocacy and Government Relations for AUVSI. Greg Parker is the Johnson County Engineer for Johnson County, Iowa. And Kyle Schneider is the Director of ITRI Aviation Program and GAT Consortium for NC State University. APWA is delighted to bring you such knowledge and experience. We are going to start the program with each of the panelists giving a brief overview on how they are involved with unmanned aircraft systems. Chris, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Rita. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share our experience with the rest of the professionals here. I'm Chris Balaji, Director of Public Works for the San Joaquin County in California. Our experience with drone came on a hit or miss case. Actually, we were looking for a technology solution for bridge inspections, and we ended up finding a very expensive solution, which is around $650,000 to buy a truck or to lease them, which the availability was very scarce for us. So we were looking for a technology solution. And, a couple of years back, the technology was still at its infancy at that time. We came across the drone solution. It wouldn't satisfy us 100% for the application that we were looking for, but it could take care of most of the bridge inspection issues that we were having without having a truck to go, having traffic control and such. So we found this drone as a feasible solution. And then we developed a business case for other applications. We ended up purchasing a drone which more than paid for itself within the first year itself. So now we use the drones for all kinds of applications, other than the bridge inspection. That includes for public outreach, to do environmental surveys, to do actually topographic surveys, for channel inspections, and so forth. So that's our experience with drones. We started off with one thing, and we found out that it has a lot wider applications than what we anticipated that to do for us, and we're happy with it.
Thank you so much, Chris. Trevor, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. I'm a surveyor and a Part 107 license holder out of Joplin, Missouri. I work for Anderson Engineering. I've been utilizing UAS for 4 years now. I use drones for civil engineering, pre-design, orthos and surfaces, construction, update pictures and aerials, mining remediation services, surfaces and aerials, GIS mapping, and all kinds of inspections, including bridge inspections, TV tower inspections. And I've also been merging LiDAR data with drone data to complete data sets. So you get an oblique looking data set as well as a downward looking data set.
Thank you, Trevor. Patrick, would you like to go next?
Yes, I would love to. Hello, good morning. My name is Patrick Gray. I am an EIT and the GIS coordinator for the Utility Engineering Department for the City of McAllen Public Utility. I got my drone license and used the drone along with along with a software called Drone to Map to take pictures from the drone, mesh them together, and create a real-time base map that is not only georeferenced, but can be used to place CAD drawings, not just from ArcMap, but from MicroStation and other AutoCAD softwares on top to give a better visualization of a future project site. So when we make presentations in order to get a pre-approval to start construction of a subdivision, it's nice to have these proposed drawings on top of what they're actually going to be constructing on. We've actually used this on several projects, and it's just become a wonderful thing, and I can't wait to see what the future has in store.
Thank you, Patrick. Tom, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure thing, Rita, and good morning, everyone. I'm Tom McMahon with AUVSI. We're the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. We got our start in 1972. A group of Air Force researchers at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, were interested in learning more about robotics and engineering, and also meeting with others who were involved in this space as well. They also were seeking to defend the budget they were getting to develop drones during the Vietnam War. So this was indeed a very long time ago if you consider that in 1972, Ford introduced the Pinto. So we've certainly come a long way in transportation since that time. And so has AUVSI. Over the years, we've been looking not only at military applications, but of course commercial and civil applications as well. And we've been looking into just more than aircraft. We've also been looking into ground systems and maritime systems. And we now have thousands of members around the world who are involved in all three of those domains of the unmanned systems industry. Also through the years, AUVSI developed a conference called Exponential. It's the largest conference for robotics and unmanned systems in the world, and it'll be meeting in Chicago coming up next spring, so we invite all of you to come out and see that. It's 4 days of education seminars and an exhibit floor with nearly 800 exhibitors that are there showing off all types of aircraft and ground and maritime systems. So it's a real fun place to go if you want to learn more about this industry. AUVSI also has other conferences during the year, one that we sponsor with the FAA called the FAA Symposium, and the Unmanned Aircraft System Symposium. And we're working to organize that sometime in the late winter or early spring of next year. But we appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today and happy to answer any questions you may have, especially on the policy side of unmanned aircraft systems. As you may know, Congress just last week passed the FAA reauthorization bill, and there's a section in that bill that is just about UAS and the provisions in there about providing more funding for research for unmanned aircraft systems, and also for provisions that direct the FAA to come up with rulemaking to allow for more expanded operations, such as flying over people and flying beyond line of sight. And that flying beyond line of sight is really the untapped benefits that you'll find from unmanned aircraft systems, under the current regulatory regime we have, there is a lot of limitations on where and when you can fly. But hopefully in the next few years, we'll see regulations that will open that up and allow for much more expanded operations.
Thank you, Tom. Greg, would you like to go next?
Hi, yes, good morning. Greg Parker, Johnson County engineer. I'm a licensed PE in the state of Iowa. I've been in my current position for 14 years. I am a Part 107 pilot. I also am an airplane pilot and have 1,300 hours of flying time. Instrument rated multi-engine. If I could, I'd like to throw a shout out to those that are being impacted by Hurricane Michael. I hope you all have a speedy recovery. Devastation down there is just terrible. But I am seeing lots of videos of drones, which brings us to this subject, is that many things that I'm looking at doing in my department is surveying construction management activities, stockpile volume calculations, bridge, reinforced concrete box inspections, and we're also looking at utilizing drones for locations where staff has a hard time getting into. So I can fly those drones in there and get video or pictures of damage that we wouldn't want to send our employees into. For emergency services, the list is endless. We are currently looking at getting into a higher level drone system for my department to utilize for engineering design activities. Thank you. Rita?
Thank you, Greg. And finally, Kyle, would you like to give your introduction?
Certainly. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. And Greg, appreciate the shout out as we've got our storms coming in here any minute now. Things will definitely get a little more exciting here with with Hurricane Michael coming in. But no, I just wanted to share with everybody. I've been doing drone stuff since 2000, working for a little software company at the time, doing artificial intelligence, and now it's turned into this world. Let's focus on integration. UAS integration, drone integration, we all know is a systems challenge of how do we take these technologies, how do we take the current regulations, how do we take the current acceptance of the social and the public to pull all these things together, and how do we use these technologies? What are they good for? What are the applications? So in our role here at NC State, we run a consortium. That's what the Next Gen Air Transportation Consortium is, about 35 members strong, working on how do we advance aviation, how do drones become the prototype for doing that, how do we use these in everyday applications, but then also supporting our contract service providers too. So we also support the FAA on the Assure Center of Excellence. So that's back on the big research needs that the FAA has over the next 5 to 10 years for broader integration. We're a member of the North Carolina Department of Transportation IPP team. So we're working on medical package delivery, helping with safety case analysis and initial testing and simulation here around Raleigh also. And so our focus really is this integration, developing best practices, working with our state agencies, emergency managers, local communities, in addition to the Department of Transportation. But then, like I said, working within our consortium too, that is engineering firms, it's these local municipalities, and also other academia to say what are the real capabilities, where do we see drones going. So we've been working on this for a while, and we're excited to share here and be part of this panel.
Thanks so much, Kyle. Now we're going to get started with our questions. So remember, you can send those into the chat pod at any time. Our first question is, it's been mentioned some in the introduction, but Kyle, could you expand on what some of the applications are for UAS and Public Works?
I certainly can. I can share some of the things that we've done working with, like City of Raleigh. One of the big projects we did early on with them was flying over our landfills and working with the waste management team there in the city, using drones for training applications to help with how does the waste management team monitor how are trash bins being collected, how are they being redistributed out as new guys are coming on. Actually just using the aerial view to capture imagery for supporting training was great. And then going out to the local landfill, I know a lot of public agencies and local municipalities that have used these for doing volumetric analysis of landfills. So In addition to some of the inspection, I think we've got a couple other folks here on the panel that can talk about inspection and construction applications. But some of the things that we've done specifically for Public Works has been landfills and working with waste management.
Thank you. And I think Chris wanted to add to that answer.
Yes, as Kyle mentioned, those landfill surveying is our moneymaker, so to speak, actually. It paid for our drone, more than twice its cost because we have been spending a lot of money doing aerial surveys, which is required by our Department of Recycle and Recovery to show that we reach sufficient compaction. So these drones have been a very valuable tool. The other thing that we have also found this drone to be very valuable is for public outreach. To give you an example, we were actually going to be doing a roundabout project, and there were a lot of opposition from farming community that this particular thing, the layout that we were doing may not work. And so we actually set up a test template, and we actually ran the legal size tracks, and we were able to capture a drone video, and we were able to show that to our local farm bureau and other areas. So when the people actually saw that these trucks could maneuver through this template, they bought the project actually. So this wasn't possible. We could show some pictures of it, but seeing that in real video, it was a great help. And also during our 2017 storms, we were considering using drones, much like Kyle said, to send the drones to areas where it could be physically dangerous for us actually take a truck and go do inspection. These types of equipment comes in really, really handy for us and make it really safer as well.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. The next question is, are you required to have an FAA Part 107 UAS license to work for your employer? Greg, could you answer that one?
Yes, thank you, Rita. It is a requirement by the FAA that if you are going to be doing anything commercially related, and that could be as innocent as you working for your employer, taking your drone out and utilizing it to do, say, you're going to check your sand salt pile and want to do an area calculation on it. Maybe you want to take your drone out and fly it on a construction site to take video and use it as a presentation to show to your elected officials, the people you report to. That is considered commercial environment, and you are required to have your Part 107 license. Thank you, Rita.
All right. Then follow-up question on that one. Greg, can you fly over people or vehicles with the drones?
No, unfortunately, the FAA specifically states that you cannot fly drones over people at any time. And I think one of the speakers had referenced that they spoke earlier, not today, but at another time, that there have been waivers minimally granted by the FAA. It's my understanding that they're only allowing that type of waiver if the drone is tethered either to the operator or the ground or something where they could control the drone from overhead operations, but it is not allowed through the FAA. Thank you, Rita.
All right, and Tom, did you want to add to that answer?
Yeah, just to add on to what Greg was talking about, the waivers, you can apply for a waiver through the FAA. You can go to their website at FAA.gov/UAS to get more information there about waivers. But they've granted waivers just in a limited way for flying over people. As Greg had indicated, a lot of times they want to see the drone tethered, or in very limited cases, they will let the drone fly over people. There was a waiver that was granted just last month to an insurance company to do inspections over North Carolina after the hurricanes there, so they could do inspections of neighborhoods that had suffered losses during the hurricane. So there is some limited amount of flying over people now, but not that much. However, the FAA is looking into a rule for flying over people, and they've indicated that notice of proposed rulemaking will be coming out sometime in the first half of next year. So we may indeed see a rule for flying over people, but probably not any time in the near future.
All right, thank you, Tom. The next question is, should public works agencies build their own drone teams or contract the services from existing providers? Kyle, would you like to start on that answer?
I certainly can start on that one. Thanks, Rita. And of course, being in the academic world, it's easy to say it depends, but that will be the standard answer on this one. It depends on where the budget sits, how much do you really have to invest in, and what are the mission sets that you're going to tackle. Is it something you have the internal knowledge and you can build up the capabilities internally to do those? So, say construction and survey, do you have the GIS? Do you have the experience doing that? If it is, much like Chris is saying, if it's the marketing side of videography, do you have somebody that can pull those resources together, present the product that you want? If you don't know what that product is, then you probably do want to contract out the service. One of the great things we've seen over the last couple of years since Part 107 has gone active and the technologies continue to be available is try it before you buy it. So using contractors to get out, do some initial projects. In the meantime, develop the team, see how the team would use the technology, and also get all your policies in place, because you really don't want to go fly until you've actually got a program built. So that's one of the things that we've been recommending. So we've seen both work. Here at NC State, we've supported both operations. We've helped some of our local municipalities build up programs, providing them guidance, and then we've also provided services for other agencies too. And so we can offer best practices on both sides.
All right, and Chris, would you like to add to that answer?
Sure. I agree with Kyle's response. We feel that having some in-house expertise that could supplement with the consulting expertise for larger projects would be beneficial, especially during times of emergencies when we will not be able to on the fly, no pun intended, get the consulting services on board and go out and inspect stuff. Especially the San Joaquin County where we are. We have over like 300 miles of levees and stuff that we maintain, we inspect. So during storm events, if there is an emergency that we got to go out and look at something, I think it would be beneficial to have trained staff in-house, at least to supplement as and when we need it with the consulting or contracting services. So there is real value in having in-house staff trained and available, ready to go for emergencies.
Thank you, Chris. Greg, and you wanted to add something further?
I could, yes, thank you. Everything and all of the above comments are fantastic. Certainly, we have to evaluate everything we do on, is this the tool that I want to use for this specific activity or project? And I think that as we proceed through this, and you're going to find that you may want to go out and have a company or professional firm do the surveying for you or drone activities, and you may have the capabilities to do it in-house. But because the technology is changing so fast that in a year, the things that we're doing now are going to be different a year from now. So just keep that in mind, that if you purchase or look at purchasing a system now, it's going to work for you, and it will work for you in the future. But with the technology changes, you'll need to stay on top of that, just like we do with our surveying equipment. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Greg. We have a question from Frank. What kind of resources are you using to validate the accuracy of the UAS data? I think Patrick wanted to answer that first, followed by Trevor.
Yes, with drone to map, it's actually really easy to check to see if the accuracy of your orthomosaic is on spot or not. Because after the orthomosaic is created, you could do one or two options. You see, drone to map is actually a product of Esri, and since Esri works with Google, and before you start the project, you actually have a Google base map on this. So when you create your orthomosaic, it will place, if it's accurate, it'll place perfectly in line with, let's say, if you flew over a street, the orthomosaic will place right on top of it. You can actually see if the orthomosaic is off a little bit, or if it's or if it's spot on. The other way you could do to make sure that the accuracy is perfect is that you set up what's called GCPs. That stands for Ground Central Points. Now, ground central points you pick up with your standard GPS unit. For us, we use what's called the Trimble, the TSC3 with the R10. That gives and what that's used for is that the pictures that you take use those ground central points that you collected as reference points, and it anchors all the pictures together. And then once you're able to, once the software is processing the pictures, it is able to mesh these pictures with respect to these reference points. So, and a better way to put it is that the reason why a ship lowers its anchor is so that the ship doesn't move. Same thing. The reference point anchors the picture so it stays at one spot. And you can check all this after the orthomosaic is done on the software by using what's called the, it's like a project analysis form, and it gives you an actual list of accuracy points to make sure that everything turned out perfectly. There you go.
Thank you very much. And I believe Trevor wanted to follow up as well.
Yes, as a surveyor, this was really important to us because if we're going to use a drone for contours or for surfaces, we need to know that our data is correct. So the way that we actually checked it was to go ahead and fly it like Patrick said, and add your ground control points, and then after that's done and you have extracted the surface, go back to the site and compare apples to apples, find some curb and gutter, edge of a concrete, and then look at the elevations, look at your horizontal, and make sure that they match. So far, with my experience, it actually depends on the camera that your drone is using, because the density of your points is determined by two things: how low you fly and what the resolution is of your camera. So the better resolution you have and the lower you fly to the ground, the more dense your point clouds are going to be. So with my experience, I'm flying with a 38 megapixel camera, usually at 70 meters, around 210 feet, and I'm getting usually a 10th accuracy. And sometimes better than that, depends on if I do a higher overlap on my flights, things like that.
All right, thank you very much. And Josh has a question about how long can a drone stay airborne, looking at it from a traffic counting application. Patrick, did you want to go ahead and answer that one?
Well, from my knowledge, really, there really isn't any exact rule of how long a drone can stay in the air. If there is, any one of the other panelists can chime in and comment on that. But from my knowledge and studying with the, getting the license, it really all just depends on the battery life. And if you know how long your battery life is going to be, then that pretty much gives you an idea how long the drone should stay in the air. And you always want to stay on top of that, because what happens is that after a certain time, when the battery life of the drone starts depleting, it does an automatic landing no matter where it is. And you have to be aware of that at all times, because the drone can land on top of, let's say, moving vehicles, or just wherever the drone is at that exact moment. So, if there's any other exact rules about airtime, please, other panelists chime in, but that's the extent of my knowledge.
Okay, looks like both Greg and Trevor wanted to answer that question. So let's start with Greg and then go to Trevor.
Great discussion. I have not seen anything in the regs about limitations of flying times. Once you get your drone in the air, your limitations are going to be absolutely as referenced, your battery time. So you need to put a lot of consideration into, typically you're going to see total battery time on a drone is going to be 30 minutes. That does not mean that you're going to fly your drone out there 30 minutes, because by the time you want to bring it back, you're not going to have enough power to bring it back, so you're going to be walking into wherever it dropped. So rule of safety is generally you want to have at least 10 minutes of distance safety or time safety on your battery once you get it airborne. And the reason for that is, and you may want more, but the reason for that is so that when you want to bring it back, depending on the air, the winds that are pushing against your drone to bring it back, the distance you have your drone from you, all of those things you'll want to have calculated as part of your return time. Thanks, Rita.
All right, thanks, Greg. And Trevor, did you have something to add as well?
Yeah, thanks, Rita. One thing whenever it comes to drones actually counting traffic, from my experience whenever I did my research, it actually comes from tethered drones. So that's where people are applying to get these waivers. So it's actually coming from drones that have an unlimited life because their power source is from an actual extension cord. So that's my take on it.
All right, thank you. The next question was from Steve. Are there any special insurance requirements to fly a drone commercially? And I believe Tom wanted to answer that one.
Sure. The FAA doesn't require drone operators to carry insurance. In fact, the FAA doesn't even require airlines to carry insurance, which is pretty interesting. But airlines, of course, know that having insurance is a pretty good idea, and I think any company or government organization that's flying a drone, you really need to have insurance in order to operate. But it'd be interesting to hear if the other panelists, what their views are on insurance.
All right, I believe Greg wanted to comment on that.
Yes, thanks. Absolutely, there's not a requirement, but if you're flying commercially, like we do anything commercially in life, you should absolutely have some type of a liability insurance, not to mention to cover your drone, but that's lesser insignificant cost adverse to something bad happening out there while you're flying the drone. You can get insurance via general insurance carriers for the year, so you'll pay a premium for a year. They can get $100,000, $300,000 coverage or more or less, depending on where you want to go with it. And there are two sources out there that allow you to pay for insurance at the time that you get your drone, just before you get your drone in the air, and then you turn that off when the drone is down. So you only pay for that part of insurance while you're actually commercially flying the drone. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you. And Chris, did you have something to add to that on insurance?
Yes, this is something that we were checking on before we bought the drone, because we thought that we could be using it much more robust for many applications. So insurance, for just like any automobile insurance, we talk about the liability insurance and also the comprehensive insurance for the drone itself. So we actually purchased both of them because we invested a lot of money into this technology 2 years ago. Of course, things are coming down in price now. So we checked with our county council, being the government, right? Deep pocket, we want to make sure that we don't get into any trouble. And we were told that our general liability insurance could apply towards this drone as well. So they did some research and they found out that our existing coverage could have this endorsed for that. And the second thing we did for the comprehensive side was we actually bought it when we bought the drone. We bought an insurance with the manufacturer, so that if it fails or if it gets into any crash or anything like that, it's sort of an extended warranty, replacement warranty. Trust me, it did help us once actually through the course of our use. We had a crash, and lucky for us with that insurance, we were able to replace the equipment.
Thank you, Chris. And Trevor, did you have something to add as well?
Yeah, thanks, Rita. So currently most drones are running off of lithium-ion batteries, so it's always a great idea to have insurance for the replacement of your drone. From personal experience, Lithium-ion batteries are super susceptible to the cold, so you could have 100% battery on the ground. As soon as you get it up to height, it shows 20%, and then it falls out of the sky. So it's always a good idea to have insurance. As far as deductibles go, I did some shopping around. Maybe some people would be interested in it. And as far as the deductible goes, if you had to replace it, it usually is 10% of the replacement cost of the drone. So. Thank you.
The next question is from Cindy. Will the bill that is currently trying to be passed through the Senate, S-1405, affect the Part 107 course and or create a new certification? Tom, did you want to answer that, followed by Greg?
Sure, start that off. The good news is that S-1405 was actually included in the bill that passed Congress last week. So it passed the House the week before last, passed the Senate last week, and it was signed by the President on Friday. So we do have a new FAA bill, and that's the good news. As far as Part 107 goes, there's no changes to the way Part 107 currently operates. So if you want to operate a drone now, it's still the same process you take as before. You go to the FAA and take a test and pay a small processing fee, and there's also a background check you'll have to take. But that's currently all you need now if you want to fly commercially or for a civilian government agency. But in the future, the FAA has been directed by Congress to come up with rules to expand the operations for Part 107. The first that we're going to see is flying, as I mentioned, flying over people, and we'll hope to see that rule come out in about a year or so. Then they've also directed the FAA for expanded operations such as flying over people, such as flying beyond visual line of sight, which includes flying over people, but for flying beyond visual line of sight. And that'll be helpful if you're flying over any kind of right-of-way, if you're doing pipeline inspections or power line inspections or doing telecommunications inspections. Right now, you have to operate the drone from the base of the tower and then fly it up to inspect it. But by flying beyond visual line of sight, you'd be able to fly along the whole right-of-way. So I think that's a real advantage that we'll see in Part 107 in the years to come.
All right, thank you, Tom. And Greg, did you have something to add to that answer?
Yes, thank you. Briefly, what an excellent discussion that was. I haven't reviewed the new bill in depth to that level, but I would totally agree from what I've seen. No changes as part of the Part 107 activities. However, there are freedoms that the FAA has been granted as part of the bill that you could potentially see changes in the future where they have the option to do that. So it's kind of been open-ended. They can make mods as needed. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom, did you have a follow-up to that answer?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, and under the new FAA bill that was signed into law last week, the FAA now has jurisdiction of all aircraft in the airspace. Previously, they did not have jurisdiction over recreational operators, but they do now. And as Greg referred to, there will be some changes coming along with equipage, most likely, with remote ID. So you may see a rule coming out early next year from the FAA in addition to flying over people, but a rule for remote ID. Right now, most drones have the capability to identify themselves in the airspace. It's a matter of coming up with standards as to how will that remote identification be transmitted and how it will be received on the ground. And that's what the FAA is going to be working out. But having remote ID, of course, is important for identifying air traffic in the airspace, for managing that air traffic. And as we get more drones in the airspace, it'll be important to do that. So look for Rule 2 next year on remote ID.
Thank you so much, Tom. The next question is from Mark. What density or spacing of ground control points would you recommend to ensure horizontal and vertical mapping accuracies near 0.1 foot? Patrick, could you answer that question, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. From my experience and what I've discovered is that it's not really the spacing that matters, because you can actually have two ground central points of about 300 feet across from each other. But if you're at the appropriate distance from an airfield, like let's say the rules are if you're 5 miles away from the airport and you get the drone up to its maximum height of 400 feet, Those 2 points it can show up in one picture. So really, the best way to get a low, what's called a RMS error, which stands for root mean square, is to make sure that your ground central points are GPS correctly. And what I mean correctly is that you want to make sure that, of course, your Trimble unit's set up, you're in the correct coordinate plane, state coordinate plane, and you want to make sure that everything. And well, for me, you want to make sure that when you're processing on the software, you make sure that you have all the points and everything lined up. Like you can actually click the center of each of the GCPs to make sure that the picture is referenced correctly there. And again, like to sum it all up, the best way to make sure that you have a perfect RMS is to make sure that your GPS unit is correctly set. I've actually gotten an RMS error of 0.0009 on some of my projects, and that's almost as spot on. That's about as spot on as can be.
All right, thank you. And I believe Trevor wanted to add to this answer.
Yeah. So whenever it comes to ground control points, for one, it depends on what kind of project I'm doing. So if I need my vertical accuracies to be really tight, I'm obviously going to put way more targets on the ground. And whenever I do arrange those targets, it's going to be where I have good triangulation. So in that triangulation, meaning that I want to have equilateral triangles between my targets. So if you can imagine, if you're doing a square, you would have something that looks like the 5 of dice on your project. And then once you have those referenced in, your project's going to be on good, you're going to have a good surface. However, it depends on the size of the project too. So if I'm going to have 10 acres, I might do 10 ground control points, whereas if I'm doing 100 acres and I want a really good vertical surface, I might have 40 to 50 ground control points depending on the relief of the terrain. So it really differs on what exactly you're looking for. If you're just looking for horizontal accuracy, I don't put as many ground control points on the ground because I don't really care about the surface. So.
All right, thank you. The next question is also for you, Trevor. How do I utilize UAS in controlled FAA airspace, usually metropolitan areas where GIS is most valuable?
Yeah, so there are actually 2 ways to fly in controlled airspace. You either have to get an airspace authorization or have a waiver. The difference between the two is that an airspace authorization is for, or it can be for a prolonged period of time, up to 2 years, and it can cover a wide area. So you can actually do the whole airspace if you wanted to. Whereas waivers are usually for a specific date, time, and place. And so you're really limited as to where you can go. You can apply for these airspace authorizations, so the ones with a blanketed area for a prolonged period of time, usually through the drone zone portal on the FAA's website. But the only problem with that is that process can take in excess of 5 months, and I know that from personal experience, where I actually got denied at the end. So even though you apply for it, doesn't mean you're going to get access to that. Now there's also 2 methods to apply for a waiver. Okay, you can apply through the drone zone portal, but the issue with that is it could take 90 days or less to use 90 days or less, sorry, or you could use the newly implemented LANC system. So LANC, or LAANC, stands for Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability. LANC is a system to apply for a waiver through a third-party app, and the authorization times are almost instantaneous. The app that I personally use is called AirMap. You can get it on your phone or your tablet. And the way it works is that the controlled airspace is broken up into 1-mile grids. On these grids, you'll see a height in AGL or above ground level that you can fly. So, and then once you get on your phone and you select where you're going to be and the height, as long as it's under the specified AGL in that grid, You usually get instant authorization via text message, usually within the first 10 seconds. However, the grids closest to the airport usually have an ATL as 0. So in these areas, the FAA or the third party app actually has to contact air traffic control at that airport, and they have to be notified and asked from the FAA to get clearance from them. And there's also a good chance you could get denied, but it's worth a try. Some airports right now do not participate in the LANC system, so you still got to apply through the old way. But here in Joplin, Missouri, almost all the airports actually participate in this, except the airport that I'm at, naturally, Murphy's Law. But hopefully by 2019, we could have all airports utilizing the system and make it better for everybody.
All right, thank you. I believe Chris wanted to add to that answer.
Yes, I was going to say that, there is an app for that, right? So I'm pretty sure Tom would have more to add to this. There is typically, this is a serious business, very controlled environment. And so even though it appears like a toy, it has a lot of rules and regulations attached to it. So to stay out of trouble, our folks encourage that check all the local regulations and the state regulations in addition to the FAA regulations before we fly. And there is an app that our folks, I learned that they use before you fly. That's B as in boy, number 4, UFLY. And also, I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of other apps that are available as well. And this is the app I learned that our folks use here to check to see where we can or where we cannot fly. More specifically, I learned that the other prohibited areas, in addition to the airports, include prisons, national parks, and military bases as well. So it's better to check twice before we launch this drone so that somebody doesn't come knocking on our door for any violations later.
Thank you, Chris. Tom, you had something to add to this?
Yeah, just to add to that, a great source for learning what the rules are for flying is a site that we started with the FAA and the the Academy of Model Aeronautics a few years ago. Those are the recreational operators. It's called knowbeforeyoufly.org. So similar to the Before You Fly app, just put a no in front of it. So it's knowbeforeyoufly.org. There's information there on if you're just a recreational operator, where you can fly, if you're a commercial or a civil operator, what the rules are and where you can fly. And also, as Chris pointed out, it's good to check what the local rules are. The FAA has jurisdiction over all the airspace, but they do allow state and local governments to determine where drones can take off and land. And usually that's pretty much wherever you'd like to do that, but there are some localities and some states that have limited where you can fly, or where you can take off and you can land. So it's good to check on those rules before you fly. But also, as Trevor was talking earlier about the LANC, he uses AirMap, and that's one of 14 providers. The bad news is it's not available at all airports right now, but the good news is it's coming to an airport near you soon, and hopefully coming to Trevor's airport as well. But check the FAA's website to see all the different LANC providers and download one of their apps for your phone or tablet.
Thank you, Tom. And we have another question from Frank. Has an agency used drones for inspection, public works in an urban environment? I'm not seeing any hands go up. Can somebody speak to that from our panelists?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah.
Lisa? Sorry.
Sure. Has any agency used drones for inspection of public works in an urban environment? Okay, no hands are going up from our panelists, so I'm thinking the answer is not from the people that are present today. Okay, the next question is from Mark. What is the advantage of a fixed wing drone over a quadcopter type drone? When do you use one over the other? And I believe Trevor wanted to answer, followed by Patrick.
Yeah, so the advantage is mostly battery life. Well, I should say opposite. So the advantage of a fixed wing is that the battery life lasts a lot longer. I can actually grab this one. So we only have one motor on this one, where we have 8 motors on that one. So it's going to take a lot more energy to power it. So I can actually fly for 45 minutes with my fixed wing drone, whereas my quadcopter or my octocopter is actually only good for 12 minutes on a hot day. It really depends on the temperature outside, how long those lithium polymers batteries last. So also the camera that I have on my octocopter is a lot better than the camera I have on my fixed wing. So it depends on the situation. If I'm wanting to do 300 acres, obviously I'm going to be going with my EV. If I've got a smaller area, I'm going to go with my octocopter. So I'm going to get a lot higher resolution that way. So that's the difference between the two.
All right, thank you. And then there was a question, I believe, for Patrick. Can you cover the use of RTK versus GCP?
Yeah, sure, totally. RTK, what that is that's the actual network that the data collector uses to connect with the satellite, and that's how you get your accurate, what's it called, GPS points. Now, the thing is that you need actually both of them when making an orthomosaic. So there really isn't a difference between the RTK network and the GCP. Really, it's one of those where it's like it's apples and oranges, but you both need them to work together so that you can create your accurate orthomosaic. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. The next question is for Chris. What kind of training is needed for UAS?
Well, it depends on the drone and what applications we use that for, obviously. Right? You know, if we are going to be using the drones for survey-grade applications, then obviously that the operators need to be trained on both the use of the hardware as well as the software that, you know, we are going to be using. And our folks here use the Pix4D software for processing the data after we fly the drones. So obviously that, you know, training needs to be obtained, you know, either through the vendor who sells the drone or separately before, you know, we start actually using the drone as well. We purchased that training as a package from the vendor, so that it worked out great for us as well. And of course, right, you know, these days there are a lot of training that's available online. There are YouTube tutorials on do's and don'ts on the drone use. And then there are also some, you know, lessons learned type of YouTube that I have found actually as an amateur, you know, drone enthusiast, if you say so, call myself so. And also there are instructions that the manufacturer who puts out. We bought a package where the manufacturer actually trained you know, our drone pilots, you know, before they even got the license. Actually, they went through an intensive training course through the vendor themselves on the use, do's and don'ts, and the applications and such. So there are, depending on the type of applications, depending on the type of equipment that we purchase, there are a lot of you know, training that is available, both free of cost as well as we can subscribe for you know, online, as well as for the in-class type of a training as well.
Thank you, Chris. Patrick, you had something you wanted to add on training?
Yeah, believe it or not, I'm actually giving training courses on Drone to Map, and I have a set date here in the Valley. If there is anybody close to the McAllen, Texas area, that if you're interested in learning how to use Drone to Map, I will be giving a training course on November 15th here at the McAllen Convention Center. And it's not one of those where you're just going to hear me talk. You're actually going to have hands-on training with the software as well. So if anybody is available, and the great thing about it is that if you're a PE, you can actually mark this down for your continuing education credit, and you can actually post it as part of your GISP training as well.
Thank you, Patrick. Tom, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, as you've heard, there's lots of great places to learn how to fly a drone. It's great to hear what Patrick's doing about how to actually use a drone for mapping. I think it's a real worthwhile class. Also, AUVSI is starting what's known as a Trusted Operator Program. And this will be a certification program for drone operators to get certified in a whole different array of areas of expertise, including mapping. So look for that launch for our Trusted Operator Program. When you go through a training program with a certified operator, you yourself will get certified, so that will give you a leg up if you're a private operator and you're looking to get contracts to do mapping, or if you're working for a government or a government agency and you want to show your management that you have a proficiency in doing this with drones. I think will be a real positive for the industry just to show, but the type of specific training is being offered out there for specific type of operations.
Thank you, Tom. Trevor, you had something you wanted to add as well on training?
Yeah, so as far as the Part 107 license holders, you don't have, if you want to train somebody else within your company, you don't have to be manipulating the controls. So you can actually have somebody else who wants, if they're aspiring to get their Part 107 license, you can actually hand them the controls and they can operate it legally, as long as you are supervising as the Part 107 license holder.
Thank you, Trevor. Tom, I see your hands up. Did you have a follow-up answer you wanted to include?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, just checking. Okay, the next question is for Greg. Greg, you had mentioned that you are also a airplane pilot. Are you required to be an aviation pilot to acquire your Part 107 license?
No, that's a great question. No, you're not required to be a pilot. It's just two different ways of getting your Part 107 license through the FAA. Each 107 pilot or potential pilot that wants to do this is required to pass the FAA examination, which is the same examination that any pilot will take to become a pilot. So I recommend you prepare for it. It's not an easy exam, but there are many venues that can assist you. The FAA website's a great resource, and many other training activities to study for the written examination. Thanks.
Okay, great. And this is probably going to be our last question, depending on how long the answer lasts. But what is the biggest obstacle with utilizing UAS for GIS projects? Trevor, do you want to start with that answer?
Before that, I kind of wanted to highlight Greg's question just a little bit. So on Part 107, because I'm sure people want to know what the examination is like, it's actually only 60 questions. If it's your first time, if you're having to redo your recertification for Part 107, it's only 40 questions. There's several sites that have training on how to prepare for that. I only trained for 2 weeks before having to actually take the test, and I did fine. As far as the obstacles go, I think we kind of highlighted it before, but right now it's being able to fly over people. There's so many different projects that I would love to be able to do, but I can't because I can't fly over people. We've got I've applied for tons of waivers to fly over people, and I've gotten denied every time. Because for GIS projects, we actually, where I work, we're trying to, we wrote an algorithm that will actually, if you spray paint manholes and water meters, it'll pick those out of an ortho instead of collecting them by regular means of GPS. And it would make gathering that data a lot simpler. So as of right now, that hurdle of flying over people is our biggest obstacle.
All right, thank you. Greg, you wanted to add to that?
Actually, I was just going to talk about the other question that you had. So.
Oh, okay. And Patrick, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, real quick. The great thing about Drone to Map is that the Esri, the people who are in charge and kind of the creators of ArcMap, created Drone to Map. So when after you create the orthomosaic on Drone to Map, it's all apples to apples, and you can actually import those orthomosaics as a raster file and paste them onto ArcGIS. That's the best way to make what's it called, your deliverables. So you can pass this around to anybody else who has ArcGIS, or like I've mentioned before, you can actually export it and turn the raster file into what's called the TIFF file, and that TIFF file, people who have MicroStation or AutoCAD can open on their software programs.
All right, and I think we're down to just 1 minute left, so I think that's all the time we have for today. I wanted to thank Tom and Patrick and Trevor and Kyle and Chris and Greg, our great group of panelists, for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. This is Rita Cassida, and it's been a pleasure moderating the program for you today. Please remember to register for the next program in the series titled Talking Top Tech, Global Positioning Systems and Automatic Vehicle Location System Edition, scheduled on Thursday, December 6th at 11 Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific. Please don't forget to fill out the evaluation form. The link to the survey will be emailed after the program today. A recording of today's program will be available in the APWA Members Library and on YouTube within a week. APWA members can log into the library to access past Click, Listen, and Learns and Talking Top Techs, and also conference content free of charge. After today's program, please join us in the LinkedIn community to continue the conversation. The link was included in your program instructions and is on the screen now. I thank you for your attendance and participation during this program, and have a great day.